In the last episode, I kind of ended off saying that this vampire lounge might be a bit of a train wreck to watch. Well, actually, now that I've actually watched it, I'm gonna take that back. I actually don't think that I did that bad, and I'll explain why in just a bit. Now, for those of you just discovering my little corner of the internet and just kind of getting to know my channel, my name is Michael, and I want to welcome you to Sovereign Gaming in Life Sims, the YouTube channel where I build worlds, lots, and share my thoughts on video games in the life simulation gaming space. We are indeed continuing off of last episode. We're still doing the SimCity build-out project that I've got going on with my channel, and we are indeed back in the Midtown neighborhood, which is the neighborhood that transitions from the downtown core into some mid-dense and low-rise neighborhoods that are adjacent and surrounding it. And today we are going to be building a vampire lounge. Now, the idea with this lounge, and you'll see me map out the skyscraper in the beginning of the episode, is that I wanted to call it the 13th floor. Now, I chose the late night shell that I did because the shell was the tower that I really wanted to have to like continue that gradual step down in height into uptown and into some of the surrounding inner city neighborhoods. And this tower was the perfect height for that kind of look and feel. And I also really liked the fact that it was a darker tower, so it kind of adds a little more color and contrast into the skyline itself. Now, the drawbacks with choosing a tower as opposed to like designing from the inside out and choosing the shell from the outside in is that I'm kind of left with a floor plate that is pretty hard to work with, and this one was definitely no exception. I've made it no secret that the late night shells, specifically the tower shells, typically have like a really difficult floor plate to work with. Like they're either too small, or sometimes you have to stagger one floor to the next depending on which tower shell you use, and I had to do that in the Champagne exclusive lounge episode and also in the penthouse build as well, which was unfortunate. It led to some design faux pas that I didn't really care for, but hey, we're on a new shell here and I've got the same old challenges. You see, the challenge with this shell is two things. The first thing is that it has got a really small floor plate in compared to its size. Like, I believe it was only like a 16 by 16 floor plate that I had to work with, which was kind of unfortunate. And the other thing is that like on the upper levels, it's kind of in the middle of the tower as opposed to like being at the top floors, which is typical of the other late night shells. That Even though I'm like positioning that as a problem, it actually turned out to be a solution and as inspiration for the entire build, because I'm calling this vampire lounge the 13th floor, which is the floor that a lot of high-rise and mid-rise buildings like to leave out, like just for superstitious reasons, because it's viewed as being unlucky. And so I kind of wanted to reclaim that here, just because the tower kind of puts the playable area just in the middle of the tower, which could possibly even be the 13th floor. So that's really where a lot of the inspiration comes from for that. There are also a couple of other design choices that I decided to make for this slot as well. The first thing being that, as you guys are probably accustomed to now, I am using another Roaring Heights skyscraper object just to add that extra height into the area and to again make it feel like a more denser urban plot of land. And I know what you're thinking here, that I'm doing this a lot, and you are absolutely correct in that I'm doing this a lot with the Roaring Heights skyscraper objects, and it is completely intentional. I do want the downtown core neighborhoods to feel claustrophobic as you get closer to the center, but I don't want you to worry about that, because this is all to help taper it down and to taper down the height in a way that makes sense when looking at a downtown large city. And I essentially just don't want skyscraper objects, or like even the late night shell towers, to be placed and plotted right beside like some low-rise buildings. I want that taper down effect that I'm looking for in an urban form. And so yeah, I'm using the Roaring Heights object again. And throughout Midtown and throughout some of the other lots in Midtown, I will continue to use them just where it makes sense. And I can promise you though that like when we get into the uptown builds and some of those, like I'm tapering down the height even further. So these Roaring Heights skyscraper objects are eventually going to be phased out of the urban development as we get into uptown and to some of the other ones as well. And I am finally using like a Roaring Heights skyscraper object that's actually different from the ones that I've been using in previous downtown builds. And that I'm very happy with because I just needed a change of form. I needed a change of shape. I needed some more inspiration in terms of, just adding that mid-rise density that I needed to add into the downtown core in order to beef it up and give it the dynamic elements that I need when it comes to its height. There's also something different that I did as well for this particular plot of land, and I actually put in a laneway in between the late night shell and also the mid-rise structure, and that was totally done on purpose. For one, on like throughout the boulevard that just kind of runs west to east that this lot is facing, I really didn't want it to be like an entire wall of buildings as you're driving down, so I wanted to break it up with the spacing just a little bit. And besides, in real life, like sometimes you'll have like a little laneway cutaway here and there, so I really wanted to bring that into this build here just to kind of give it a little more intrigue, and so that you're not just going through building after building after building feeling like it's completely wall to wall. And don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against wall-to-wall building and all of that, or wall-to-wall blocks. I just think that I needed to break it up a little bit here in this particular instance. As we do some of the other midtown and uptown builds, you'll see more like wall-to-wall action in a different way. But again, those are future visions that I will have to explain later on when we actually get to those builds. For this one here, the idea with the laneway in between the late night shell tower and the mid-rise structure is that I actually wanted it to be an activated pedestrian laneway, like something that Sims can actually feel comfortable walking down towards. I've seen activated laneway projects in person in other cities as well, and I'll post up some inspirations that I had for the activated laneway. I feel like this isn't done enough in Sims 3 builds, and I really wanted to bring that kind of an urban project into Sim City, and I feel like at the end of this build, it was done really well. Now, the thing with activated laneways is that I really wanted to add some reason to actually go down that laneway. Well, that's the whole purpose of the first floor of the mid-rise structure. Now, I know what you're thinking, that I'm going to be spending a lot of time on set dressing yet again, and you would sort of be right on that. However, for the mid-rise structure, I just wanted to keep it as quote-unquote simple as possible, and I just wanted to add in a diner that's just on the first floor there. Now, we do have an actual diner lot that was created in Old Town way back when, and that was for W.C Friendly's diner, which of course I've mentioned it before, but when you place an object, a rabbit hole object, the game only recognizes the rabbit hole object as opposed to the lot's name, which is a shame, but hey, when your pop-ups pop up there, they'll just call it the boxcar diner or whatever they call it. But anyways, I wanted to place another diner in this location because it gave a purpose for the activated laneway actually existing where it did. It gives Sims access to a place of business that they normally wouldn't have access to on the street. And also, I placed some of the business as usual bistro objects in here as well, which again is that Sims 3 store set that famously blocked me from ever using the editing game mode back when I was doing the Create a World series. So that was, I have a special relationship with it now. And now that I have it in my game, I'm going to be using it often. So yeah, that's there as well. And the wonderful thing about that object is that it recognizes the hours that the lot is set at. I've done experiments in the past in the game just to see if I could place the business as usual bistro on bar lots like this, and you absolutely can. It just adopts the hours. So whatever sim that ends up owning this lot, they'll just have to hire the chef and you know, make up the menu and all that for the diners. So there is that. And I guess, you know, a little bit of storytelling is that it could be a place of business that, you know, quote unquote, launders the money for the Vampire Lounge, because the Vampire Lounge is obviously going to be serving drinks with plasma, or what they call in The Sims 3. I guess that's their way of avoiding a rating increase for blood, I suppose. But yeah, that could be a bit of storytelling that players could choose to explore if they wanted to. Another thing about this lot is that with the way that it was facing, and because I really loved how it turned out with the Gasta district from last episode, from the last speed build episode, I really wanted to put in more of that advertising in there. And I know what you might be thinking here. You might be thinking that the billboards and the advertising is just going to get blocked by buildings. And normally you would absolutely be right. However, the buildings that are going to be sitting directly behind these, just south of these lots, are going to be actually much shorter. Again, I've built one of them at this point in time where I'm recording this, but the other ones that I'm building are going to end up being low rises that are only 5 stories tall at the max. And even then, I've got some interesting ideas for forms. So what ends up happening is that they don't end up blocking the adverts as much. And that is definitely something that I want going forward, because this piece of real estate would be very great to have advertisements and billboards on, because you can see it as you're driving into the city from the bridge, from the suspension bridge, I should say. And yeah, they're a great location for that. And it was a look that was certainly achievable. And as I continue to build out uptown that lies even further south from the midtown lots, I am totally anticipating that the adverts that are placed on these lots are not going to end up getting covered by other buildings. You know what's so dumb, you guys? I actually just realized upon watching this episode and recording the audio and all that, that I completely forgot to put the menus from the business as usual bistro on the tables and on the bar counters there. So okay, so that's something I'm definitely going to have to add in for the Midtown edit episode whenever that gets released. So yeah, note to myself. All right, so obviously the diner that I am building out here right before your very eyes is indeed modeled after like 50s diners. I really love the look of classic American 50s diners where you get like a nice greasy cheeseburger and fries. But yeah, I have a lot of respect for classic diner designs, and I just wanted to incorporate that here. It fits the hours because this won't open until 5 p.m. and I believe it won't and it will operate until 4 a.m. And you know, another reason why I wanted to add in a 50s diner here is because this lot is so large and it's in such a prominent place in the downtown core. And I wanted to bring more functions to it outside of it just being like a vampire lounge, because a vampire lounge really only appeals to vampire sims or to sims that love their supernatural fans or whatever that trait is. And so I really wanted to bring something into the lot build that is actually something that could be enjoyed by sims of all walks of life. Don't know why I'm stumbling over my words there, but that was kind of the idea that I had with the 50s diner going forward here. And it is quite large now that I'm looking at it. It's quite a large diner. And the window that I use between between the kitchen and the bar that surrounds the worker area, like that's an actual window. It's not like a cutout. I was desperately looking for some sort of a cutout, and that's something that The Sims 3 really just doesn't offer, is a whole lot of window objects that are truly cutouts. I think there were only a few cutout window objects offered in the Into the Future expansion pack, and maybe there's a couple from the Sims 3 store, but I definitely don't have those. So I just had to make do with what I got, because the way that I envision it is that you would have your waitress, whoever's manning the bar, just kind of write down the orders and then give them to the chef through that little window cutout there. That's kind of like a little bit of set dressing there, a little bit of an idea that I wanted to explore. Another thing that I decided not to do is I decided not to put in any of the wall speakers. Again, those wall speakers can be disabled if you have like other stereos playing and whatnot. And I did some experimenting with the lot, and you can place a jukebox, which absolutely does fit the 50s theme, without it interrupting the wall speakers in the actual Vampire Lounge itself. So that's what I ended up doing here. Truth be told, like, the diner is definitely overbuilt. It is a little too large for the space here. At the time that I was building it, I thought it was the right size, the right and proper size. And, you know, to my defense, since this is the only diner in the downtown core, it could possibly be very popular and warrant that kind of a larger footprint on here. So, you know, I'm gonna cut myself a little bit of slack there. As we get into building the laneway, I kind of already explained that I wanted it to function more like an activated laneway. And I'm going to continue the laneway, the activated laneway build on the next speed build episode, which is the lot just directly south of this one. But this one really has some multicolored string lights attached to it. I even changed the lighting, the light color itself, just to make sure that it does appear multicolored at night, so it really does feel like a welcoming space for pedestrians at night, which is when the laneway would be most used. And I designed the laneway in a way that it is mostly something to facilitate pedestrian movement through it. I might have already explained that, so I do apologize if I'm just repeating myself, but I just added in like some benches, and it's really the lighting and the benches that make for the activated laneway there. The pillars that I'm using came with the World of Wonder set from the Sims 3 store. They're a colored pillar, and I just thought that they fit perfectly for the aesthetic that I was going for, since I really wanted it to be well lit just at night. And the string lights that I used, of course, I had to use the move objects on. I forget which set it came from, but they are just the light bulb string lights. They might have came with either the greenhouse set or one of the gardening sets from the Sims 3 store. It's definitely a Sims 3 store item. And yeah, I really love the way that it turned out. When I was using move objects, it kind of like connects into the pillar and then into the other side of the building and whatnot. And I felt that it was a really cool aesthetic there. So I really love the way that it turned out in terms of that. Speaking of Midtown and what the larger vision is for this Western block in Midtown, the Western block, you know, I didn't intend on it to end up this way, but the Western block unintentionally ended up being more like the nightlife hub of Sim City, because we've got this Vampire Lounge here. The Stylist community lot is just next door to this one. I mean, it's not exactly a nightlife hub itself, but yeah, it's certainly there. But what will be lying directly south to this lot, and what the next speed build will actually be a dance club. And then I've got like a sports bar that's going to be located in this set of Western lots here. And there's like another community lot. So it's just full of community lots, a lot of multiple uses. And what ended up happening is that Midtown becomes this nightlife hub. And that's just really this Western block here that does. The Eastern block is a little more different in terms of what it offers, because I build more residential lots on there, which I'm very excited to get started on, because I've got some new ideas there and new strategies to help taper down that density. So yeah, new strategies that don't typically involve the Roaring Heights skyscraper objects. But again, I'm not going to shy away from using them if I feel that they're right for the actual lot itself. But yeah, the bollards do get switched either at the very end of the episode, or you'll see them in the tours. The cylindrical bollards that came with late night, and you can find them in the buy debug mode. They're there to actually stop vehicles from passing through. And when I had originally placed it there, I don't know how I didn't realize this, but I placed them so they're facing against pedestrian traffic walking along the sidewalk when they needed to be placed horizontally to block vehicles from driving in. After all, it is an activated laneway, and maybe drivers from the past still think that this would be available to drive down. Well, that's not the case, and that's what the bollards are there for, to prevent vehicle traffic from trying to pass through. I'm not too sure if you guys have noticed, but one thing that I try to do when it comes to using the Roaring Heights skyscraper objects or even the late night shells is that for the exterior walls, I try to get them to match the color of the shell or the object as best as I can. Now, luckily with the Roaring Heights skyscraper objects, I can adjust the colors on those, but of course with the late night shells, I obviously can't. So why I do this is because I guess I'm just very picky, and I like to have it match, and I do the same thing with the windows as well. I try to get the windows to match the shell or to match the Roaring Heights skyscraper object as best as I can. In this case, like in this build particularly, I really loved the window match that I did on the mid-rise structure. And the reason for that is just that it gave the building an entirely new look, and it really just kind of gives a whole new look to the mid-rise structure. Like this mid-rise structure, in my opinion, looks more like an office mid-rise building as opposed to the other ones that look like they are either hotels or perhaps even like a residential mixed-use building. This one looks like it is a commercial and office mixed-use building, and I really love that. And I really love the Roaring Heights skyscraper object that I ended up using for it, just because it fit so well and it was just so different. I know I've already talked about it, but I just love the fact that I was able to match the windows exactly, and it just helped to breathe some new life into the downtown skyline. Now, as much as I have been complaining about working with shell buildings, I actually don't mind them so much. Not when there are not when the limitations don't make sense. And that's for only some of them, not for this one, that's for sure. But overall, I don't mind working with shells, like the late night shells specifically, because to me they kind of make sense in the way that they work. And I've always viewed like high-rise buildings and like really dense urban structures in life sim games as something very hard to interpret. And I feel that with shells, as they are presented in The Sims 3 and not in any other life simulation games, you still have quite a bit of flexibility on how to build and construct and build with them. And there have been a lot of updates since The Sims 3 was originally released. And one of those updates includes like faster elevator travel. So it's not like this game has been ever really ignored that much. And I just find that like as computers evolve and become more better and more adept at running games, that games like this that are older, like 15 years old now for The Sims 3, they just tend to run better. And I just really haven't had any issues with working and playing, testing with the late night shells for either commercial or residential buildings. But that's just my experience. I'm not trying to say that anyone else's experience is null and voided here, but when working with actual shell structures like this, I can see it being replicated in future life simulation games as a way to get around from forcing players into building an entire structure's worth of 20 floors, or even taller if they so choose. Of course, I'm alluding to and referring to Life by You, and who knows what's going on with that by the time this video gets released. I'm recording the audio here in late May, so who knows what'll happen from then until this video is released. But for me, like when you're creating high-rise structures, like in a life simulation game, there's a lot of building involved. If you have to build out all like 30 or 20 floors, even 12 floors is a lot to build out. And I see building shells as being a part of that solution to maybe even get around it. Or at the very least, I think that hidden rooms should be a way to get around it. Like, even if you are a builder and you kind of get lazy and you don't want to open up a certain floor or whatever, you can always just like make the floor hidden or something. I hope that's kind of making sense there. Ideally, in an ideal world, I would like all of the solutions to be available, like maybe a mix of shells, or if you wanted to build your own high-rise structure, you absolutely could. Sorry for going off on a tangent here, but honestly, like I feel like shells can be part of the solution. I feel like this is one of those solutions for high-rise structures in life simulation games where all of them can be viable, and there can be a time and a place for all of them, no matter what your playstyle is. That's just my opinion anyways. But yeah, the struggle with this particular shell tower from Late Night that I was using is that the ground floor obviously didn't match the top floor, and you'll see me adjust the elevators here and there because I really wanted to have the elevators just tucked into a corner, which is something that I'm trying to challenge myself to doing, because usually my elevators either end up against a back wall and in the middle of the top floor plate, whereas I am sort of trying to convince myself that maybe more space is available on those upper floors if I tuck away an elevator in one of the corners. So that's something that I'm trying to do here, and I'm very thankful that I did, because the top floor plate was really 16 by 16 squares, and that's like crazy small. Like, even compared to some of the other towers, like the last one that I did with the Ghast district, that had a much larger floor plate for the upper floors, and then had multiple floor plates as well, which is one of the better Late Night shells that I like to work with. And yeah, the Ghast district's Late Night shell tower is, I used the recolored ones for the for some of the housing projects in Bridgeview, and it's a floor plate that I'm comfortable working with, is really what I'm trying to say. This one was a bit more of a struggle because, again, the ground floor was much larger than the actual top floors, and the top floors was really where I needed to build out the vampire lounge. And I just really was struggling on the space there. Again, I really like the idea of it actually being in the middle of the shell tower as opposed to like the top floors, because it really did give inspiration to calling this vampire lounge the 13th floor, just to be a little more spookier and to play into those superstitions and all that. So, you know, I've got to take my wins and losses where I can when it comes to the Late Night shells. And in the like for future Late Night shells that I will be using, you guys will definitely see that they come in all kinds of qualities. The towers are generally a little more difficult to work with as opposed to the mid-rise shells. The mid-rise shells actually are almost better in some ways. I mean, there's one that's like really small, but I don't have ambitious plans for that one. So that'll be a shorter episode most likely, depending on how I lay out the rest of the lot. Anyways, yeah, I reused the chandeliers that I have downloaded from outside of the Sims 3 store, so hopefully I'll be smart enough to remember to drop the download link for that one, because I absolutely am in love with those chandeliers, and honestly I've overused them, and I'm sure that you guys are sick of seeing them, but I just love them, and I feel like even if I had access, or if I chose to have access to all of the chandeliers out there for the Sims 3, that I would still choose these ones anyways. I mean, I did challenge myself when building out the Goth Manor for using new chandeliers. So there's that, you know, I'm not that addicted, I don't think anyways. Because of the limiting floor plate that I had to work with in the upper levels, the journey to the layout of the 13th floor was certainly a journey to say the very least. There's always a couple of elements that I want to include in all of the bars, especially like a vampire lounge or a dance club or a disco club or what have you. And those elements include like a dance floor, a bar where you can actually get served drinks, bathrooms, a coat check as well, like in case it's winter or what have you. Again, I play with like 7 days of winter only since I hate winter personally, but that's just me. I don't even like it in my video games, hilariously enough. But anyways, respect to those that love winter. I'm so glad that you enjoy it. You can enjoy it for me. But yeah, the journey to the floor layout for the 13th floor was certainly something that took a little bit of time and effort to just kind of maneuver around, especially when you have objects like the bouncer gates or what have you. I forget what those are called, but the ones that spawn the bouncers on them, they do take up a little bit of space, and they're a little more difficult to kind of place because they have to be placed in front of a door within a certain way, and then it matters what size the door is. So there was a bit of a struggle here and there. I contemplated actually putting mirrors in the bathrooms because vampires can't see their own reflections, but I ended up placing it in there just because I felt it looked nice. But it was a thought that I had that crossed my mind, is why would these vampires even need mirrors in their bathrooms? But I decided to place it in there anyhow. Even if you can't see the reflection, at least you could see like the toilet stalls behind you, right? And you can at least see the frame around it. When it came to the walls and the floors, with the walls, I absolutely reverted back to a place of comfort that I am used to decorating with, and it's with those specific wall panels that I used. I changed up the colors a little bit. The color palette that I decided to use was something along the lines of a really dark red. When it comes to the decor in the 13th floor here, I've got to be honest with you guys. I was really sick of doing goth decor or darker decor. The goth manor really it really it really got all the goth decor out of me. Let me just say that. I was just so sick of it at this point that I was just like, okay, this is going to be this. And I just kind of followed through with emotions. I don't think that there was a whole lot of passion that was really introduced here. And, looking back on this lot, I feel like the 13th floor build out is honestly serviceable. I feel like it hits the themes right. It's just that, I can tell that there is just absolutely no passion put into this. And hopefully I'm not setting you guys up to see something that isn't actually there. But I feel like in total, the 13th floor vampire lounge build could be something that gets completely redone and refurbished. In the beginning, like when I first approached this project, I thought about doing actually a remake of the Blade nightclub in the opening shot of the Blade movie, which is a vampire movie featuring Wesley Snipes and all that. But when I looked into it, it was more so just like a meat shop, and I didn't feel that that was suitable for what I wanted to place on this slot, which is a corner tower that kind of that tapers down in the height and all that. So I just didn't feel like it suited this particular look and feel and build out of what I wanted to have happen here. Don't worry, I might be using that reference in a later build sometime. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. That will be certainly something that'll be interesting. But yeah, with the color scheme, I try to put in the reds subtly here and there. Of course, there are certain bolder pops of red as well, just to complement the rest of the darker reds as well. But yeah, I was really, really sick of goth decor and dark decor at this time. And placing in the dance floor was and the layout of this was just not the greatest as well. I felt just so limited by it. And I feel that it's so necessary to have bathrooms, for example, and bathrooms are one of my least favorite things to actually build out. And the bathrooms just if this was a 20 by 20 floor plate, I would have been able to fit them in a lot more gracefully, but the bathrooms just had to take up the space that they did. And in this case, because the floor plate was so small for this particular shell tower, it just took up a lot of space. So I was just kind of exhausted by this whole project at this time. And I pretty much built this one and the Ghast district back to back shortly after I'd finished off Goth Manor, because when I finished Goth Manor, I had a lot of energy and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna get right into building again. And the Ghast district honestly turned out really wonderful, and I really stand by that one. And then when I got to this one, I was just like, okay, well, I can tell that the momentum is kind of running out here. So that is a little bit of a fourth wall break, just to kind of share with you guys like a little bit of my thought process and what have you. I did place in the wall speakers. Of course, like the music that I set it to was dark wave. I mean, you can't have a vampire club and you can't have a music genre like dark wave and not have them active in this particular lot. So I did that. One thing that the floor plate really prevented me from doing, and something that really sucks, is that I couldn't actually put in a VIP room. And I would have loved to have just put in a VIP room and kind of have this open as more of a goth club. And then you have a VIP room that's more like the vampire room. Like you don't, like you have this whole cover, you know, so to speak, for when the taxman pops in. They're like, oh, this is a goth bar, blah, 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 blah. But then it's like really behind the scenes, it's really got a lot of vampire stuff into it. So that was something that I wish I was able to do with this particular build out, and I just wasn't able to. And I even like flirted with the idea just a tiny bit about adding in a basement where all of the vampires just kind of congregate and hang out in. And you know, the problem with that is that Sims just get confused overall when you have two different locations that have lots of things to do. Like they'll like go up to the upper floors, or vampires won't be making their way down to the basement. So yeah, I just didn't want to do that from a gameplay standpoint. But if like Sims could actually behave properly, or if they didn't get so easily confused by the routing, that would have been another direction that I would have considered taking. Another source of inspiration that I'll just kind of share with you guys that I was also contemplating on doing was making this more like an ice themed lounge. Like, you know how you need cold storage for, I guess, blood and I guess plasma in the Sims 3 universe. I was thinking about making this like this one huge like cold storage place where you have to where it's all like ice themed and cold and all that. That was another direction that I was considering going into as well, but we don't really have many great ice objects in The Sims 3, and outside of the ice sculptures, I just really wasn't feeling inspired at the time to do that, and I really wasn't feeling inspired at this time either when building out the bar. To finish up with the rest of the lot build, I really end off this build reverting back to the alleyway because it just felt a little too empty towards the back of the tower, and I just needed to add something in there to just give it a little more intrigue. For one, I put in like a little bit of a loading bay and a garbage place where theoretically a dump truck would, you know, do its thing and take the garbage and whatnot, using the alleyways and the laneways. But I also added in a little bit of a loading bay just to kind of give another little industrial add-on here, just something where trucks would park their trailers and you know, kind of move on. And like, it doesn't make logical sense entirely in terms of that. And then I also like paired it with this really small park. I felt that I just needed to add in a little more green space. This area, especially the park, might be something that is worthy of reworking or even redoing entirely. So I'll just kind of see how I feel when I get around to doing the Midtown edit episode, which again won't be available until after we build out the rest of the Midtown lots and all of that. So that'll be something that I'll take into consideration going forward. But yeah, I like the idea of having like a little tiny bit of green space where you can just like sit down and enjoy it and all that, because even though we have a lot of parkland within the downtown core itself, there's really not a whole lot of green space throughout the downtown lots, or well, yeah, the downtown and the midtown lots. And that's something that I'm going to have to take into consideration going forward, is just offering some sort of green space option there. But yeah, that's gonna about do it for today's episode. I know that it sounds like I'm very uninspired by the 13th floor and by the lot in general, but I feel like it's very middle of the road for me in terms of the concept and delivering on the concept. Like, I'm sure it's fine, but I feel like it's just fine. It's not something amazing, and sure, I'm probably not going to be able to hit everything out of the park like I did with Goth Manor, but with this one here, it was a real struggle, and like I could just tell that my momentum had completely died by the time I got to this build here. In fact, my mind was really in the next build that we will be doing, because I decided to take a completely different route. I took a risk, and I am totally not sure if that one's going to pay off. I know that in the last episode, I kind of said that this one was going to be a bit of a train wreck, but the next one, that one actually might be the train wreck I should have been referring to, and that is a dance club indeed. So yeah, I am very excited to show you guys that one because I feel like I'm going to get a lot of feedback on it, but I'm done teasing you there. If you enjoyed this episode and if you've enjoyed my channel and all of that, then feel free to like this video and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If the tours aren't already playing, then feel free to stick around to see those. And with all that said, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and that I hope you have yourself a wonderful day.